Everybody, welcome to the September edition of the KP Ready Virtual Demo Day. Before we get started, I wanted to do a couple of housekeeping items. If you're not aware, we have our upcoming AEC Summit on October 29th in Phoenix, Arizona. And then we also have a Vibathon on the 28th at the same location, and we still have a few spots left on that. So if you need to sign up still, go to our website at kpready.co, go to the events drop down, and you'll be able to navigate to each of those events that are upcoming. Today we've got 4 different technology providers. We have site controls, we have some robotics for the job site, AI for RFIs, and AI for submittal review. Segue over to Tom, who is focused on AI for submittal review. So Alex, if you want to unshare your screen, and Tom, take it away.
Morning. Thanks, guys. Excellent. You can all see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Fantastic. So as David suggests, I'm here to talk about our product BuildSync. Now, BuildSync is focused on the automation of submittal reviews. Now, what do I actually mean when I talk about that? Well, I think for anyone in the industry on the call that has gone through the process of doing submittal reviews, I'm sure we can all agree upon that they are very, very arduous, and they are fairly universally disliked when it comes to the industry, yet something very, very important to do. So what BuildSync aims to do throughout the process of doing submittal reviews is 2 distinct things. The first thing, for our customers, we're saving up to 80% of the time taken to do submittal reviews. And the second thing, we are driving our customers towards a 90 to 95% first-time submittal acceptance rate. Now, how we do this is fairly simple. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is just log into the platform BuildSync. And initially what we need to do is we need to set the context, which essentially meaning we need to upload our plans and specs onto the platform. So very simple. We've come through to one of our companies here. We've uploaded our drawings, and then we've uploaded our project specifications into BuildSync. What we're now going to do, because we've set that initial context, is we can now come into the platform and start to upload our submittals into BuildSync. So very simply, if we click this button here, upload submittals, drag and drop them in. We can choose the division. I would say that, frankly, most of our customers don't. BuildSync will make its own determination. But for want of a better phrase, if you're feeling generous, we can just select Div 23 in this example. Now, when we upload a submittal into BuildSync, the process it's going through is a 3-stage process. The first thing that BuildSync does is it will look into the submittal and it will break it down to a product level. Now, what we see very commonly with here, the number of products is always determined by the type of submittal it is. And what I mean by that is, of course, as you would imagine, if we're seeing lighting fixtures, we've seen situations where we've had 100 different fixtures on a submittal. If you're talking Div 23, you might just see one particular product, but that's a complex piece of equipment with a lot of characteristics. So the first check we go through in the process is we break down the products. The second thing that BuildSync does is it looks into those products and it breaks down the technical characteristics that made up these products. And of course, I'm naturally biased, but from feedback from our customers, this is where we really shine. Frankly, what we find here is that BuildSync goes into much more granularity than your average PM has time to do. It also goes into much more granularity than your average project engineer, in many cases, may have the knowledge to be able to do. So we do see ourselves very much as a learning tool for those new project engineers that are new to the industry. So what we can see here on this submittal, again, let's say we want to review one of these characteristics that BuildSync has produced. So we can see here the submittal characteristic, the refrigerant is R-454B. On the plans and specs, it's calling for 410A. So again, BuildSync has marked that out as a failure, and that is a pretty obvious failure that we can see there. However, let's say we want to check BuildSync's homework. Let's say we want to see the original source documents where this information has come from. What we can do is we can just hit this button here, see files. And what BuildSync is going to show us, if I zoom in here, the left-hand side, we're going to see the original copy of the submittal. This is always going to be on the correct page where this particular characteristic was pulled from. So we can see here in the top right-hand corner, refrigerant type R-454B. And then correspondingly on the right-hand side here, we have the plans or the specs, again, depending on where the characteristic was pulled from. And we can zoom in and we can see here 410A refrigerant type. So what I'm getting at here, guys, is that we can, if we want to see the original source documents, we can see that literally at the click of a mouse, very, very quickly. I do want to cover some more granular examples, but before I do that, I want to give you all an understanding of when BuildSync states unknown, what does that mean? Because very commonly, the initial misconception that people have is that that means BuildSync can't understand. It just doesn't know. What unknowns actually mean is there is some ambiguous reason that is not present on the plans and specs or the submittal as to why BuildSync cannot make a determination. So if we look at this as a fairly classic example, BuildSync has flagged this as unknown. What we can see here is the submittal rather is stating there is an evaporator and condenser coil coating. On the plans and specs, we can see here that it has been specified specifically for corrosion-resistant coated coils of the salt air salt fog. So BuildSync has given a contextual understanding or reason, if you will, as to why it can't make a determination, and it's simply stating a coating is specified, but not whether it is corrosion resistant. So again, if you're a GC and you're PM, PE working in a GC, this gives you a really good insight and a good question to ask your subcontractor before you send through to your design team. Now, I also want to jump into another example. So I'm going to share with you this. In this, what I'm trying to show and really demonstrate is the granularity in which BuildSync goes into when it's making its review of submittals. So this is a very common example we see, lighting fixtures. I would say 50% of all proof of concepts we run, customers will upload some type of lighting fixture for us because I think it's fairly universal that nobody likes reviewing them in the industry. So if we jump into this particular fixture here, we can see SK4. So let's have a look at this. Yeah. So again, by clicking view characteristics, I can see the characteristics that made up the particular fixture. BuildSync has just found 6 here. But where this gets interesting is that if we look at the text, what we can see here is we can see, again, the submittal value. We have LED narrow strip 44. White powder coat WireGuard. We can see the design value, but again, BuildSync has produced that reason as to why it is failing. BuildSync has stated here, note that the FP frosted polycarbonate lens for 75R is not selected. So again, let's look at the source copy document and just get an understanding of what's going on here. So if I hit this button here, see files, again, I'm going to bring up the original copy of the file. And what we can see with this example is that BuildSync is actually on the original copy of the submittal that we received from the subcontractor. We can see here that luminaire schedule states frosted lens for SK4, but we can see the sub has not selected that. So again, that potentially, if that's not caught, can be very problematic because that's not what's going to be turning up on site. And again, if we want to compare and contrast this against the source copy documents, which in this case, of course, is the luminaire schedule on the plans, we can scroll down and we can see here, where's SK4? There we go. We can see SK4 here, and we can just see exactly what the plans are stated. Now, the most important thing in all of this is that we can take this information and we can get this information into the hands of subcontractors, our vendors, our design team, depending on the determination the PM or PE is going to make. Now, all we do to do that is 2 distinct things. The first thing, we're going to hit this button here, download overview. The second thing that we're going to do is we can as mentioned, we can come into the submittal itself and hit this button here, download the submittal. What that is going to do is download this information into two distinct places. The first place it's going to download this data to is Excel. Some may consider Excel old school. I'll be honest, I don't care because the construction industry runs on it and the industry is totally fluent on it. But essentially what we're producing here is exactly what we just saw in BuildSync in an Excel spreadsheet. So we have the number of products. So this is the lighting fixtures we were just looking at. So it's got 14 here. We have found 5 failures, 8 unknowns, and 71 parsing characteristics. And then these tabs along the bottom here, what these are the individual products that made up the submittal. Now, this is useful. This does serve a purpose for sure, because you can point subcontractors or even vendors or whoever it is, you can point them in the direction. You can say, hang on a second, on page 141 of the submittal, the characteristic is stating this. On 140th page, in this case of the, let's see here, this case of the drawings, the design characteristic is this. That does not meet plans and specifications. If I send this through to a GC as a sub, or if I send this through to my design team as a GC, that's going to get flagged, and it's the merry-go-round of the submittal review process is going to happen all over again. The only thing I would state that's a potential issue with this is that, I'll be frank, some people don't read all of this granular detail. So again, going back to it, and I do have an example here, we always supply the original copy of the submittal. I will just jump in here. Where are we? There we go. Sorry. The original copy of the submittal itself that's just been marked up with the failures. So again, what we're looking at here is a submittal run through BuildSync, but the failures have been populated onto the original submittal. I do want to talk about something very briefly, because one of the principal integrations that we have is with Procore. Usually this is a question that gets asked by us. So our Procore integration, I would say 80% of our GCs are running BuildSync through Procore. The integration itself is fairly simple. We set up an API integration with Procore, but then essentially what BuildSync is becoming, for those of you, I'm sure some are on this call, familiar with Procore, is BuildSync becomes an actor in the workflow. So this certainly accounts for 80% of our GC's usage. The workflow typically would look like this. John James will be your subcontractor. Perhaps they are uploading the submittal for you, or in many cases, the GC is doing it for them. Doesn't matter to BuildSync. The ball in court then comes through to BuildSync submittals. Everything that we just saw on the platform happens in the background. So BuildSync goes in, pulls plans and specs. BuildSync goes in, of course, grabs the submittal. If it has access to, and there are any RFIs referenced on the submittal, that will be pulled down into the engine as well. And once BuildSync has done its review, again, breaking down the products, the characteristics, comparing plans and specs against the characteristics at the submittal level, the ball in court will be returned back to the project engineer or manager at the GC level. And at that point, they will then make their determination. So, which looks like this. When the information is returned back, essentially everything that we just saw, the outputs from BuildSync, is produced with inside Procore. So of course we have that marked up copy of the submittal, denoting where all of the failures were found. And then we have the compliance report that BuildSync creates as well. And so for those of you that are joining from GCs and subs, particularly GCs in this context, the world you would have to imagine is, instead of your PMs receiving an empty submittal, they have to furiously control F against plans and specs and kind of hope they've caught everything, and Ps as well, of course. They're getting something that's given them, as I said at the beginning, an 80% head start as well. Final thing, just very quickly want to talk about ROI. There is some science behind this. In our first year of trading, we did a very extensive research project to try to ascertain how much a submittal rejection costs. The number we came to was $805 every time, and this was respondents from East Coast, the middle of the country, West Coast, across the United States was the average that we came to. The workings is explained here. But in very short order, If you are a GC that is processing through 2,000 submittals a year and you're getting 30% rejected, the total annual submittal cost is $4,800, so $480,000. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that BuildSync is going to get your submittal rejections down to zero. That is patently ridiculous. That is not going to happen. But what I am saying very confidently is that we are going to drive you towards a 90 to 95 first-time acceptance rate. So with that, I will happily answer any questions.
Yeah, Tom, a couple of questions. So you had mentioned RFIs, and sometimes on a project, a clarification on a specification section may get made, whether it's a color
Yes.
or... So are you analyzing the RFIs and the specs with the Procore integration? So if there is an RFI, or do you have to direct that RFI to BuildSync?
Have to direct the RFI to BuildSync, because the issue with that is with inside Procore, you could have numerous RFIs. So typically what we say, if there is some reference to the RFI on the submittal, BuildSync will understand that's what it needs to be pointed towards. But if it isn't, it won't check for it.
Okay. And are you pulling the drawings and specifications directly from Procore, or is
Correct.
that... Okay, so if you're connected to Procore, all the drawings and specifications will get reviewed against each submittal.
Yeah. And I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but to be very clear, if you're using BuildSync and Procore, everything that I showed you in as far as uploading your plans and specs and uploading your submittals, you don't have to do. It's all done in the background for you. But if I just showed you the Procore integration with BuildSync, this demonstration would probably be 3 minutes. So hence why I like to show the platform standalone to understand the technology. And then, of course, with inside Procore, it's as I mentioned, everything happens in the background. Plans get pulled in, specs get pulled in, submittals get pulled in. It's just the information that's returned back to Procore that the user will receive.
Question from the audience. Are you expanding this to a product catalog on the GC side? I.e. like the product you upload failed on 5 points. Here's an alternate that meets
Good question.
points.
Yeah, good question.
I'll just finish off that. Or a product catalog for the designer or owner to specify the project fixtures.
Yeah, good question. Short answer is no. The next thing that we're looking at releasing, the next large element of functionality we're looking to release is submittal package generation. So we started with mechanical subs and electrical subs, and I think it stands to reason. The submittals they're processing, particularly electrical subs, often very cumbersome and complex. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to release functionality that can create submittal packages. We're starting with Div 23. We have some customers in beta on that, and then we're slowly going to be expanding out to electrical subs as well. So I like the idea of it, but it's not something we're working on at the moment.
Now, on the submittal review, is it limited to product data, or do you get into like sustainability, ESG, the different submittal types that are typical product data?
Product data.
Okay.
Product data, yeah. We don't touch product data. We don't touch shop drawings. That's what we're reviewing at the moment.
Okay. Anything else you want to let people know about where you guys are headed with this, or just leave it off at what you just said?
No, I think that covers most of it. I think, for those of you that are experiencing submittal rejections, and for those of you that are or spending a disproportionate amount of time doing this, doing the submittal reviews, which most people in my experience are, what I would say is just try the model out, try BuildSync out, and just tell us what you think.
Great. Very cool stuff, Tom. I really appreciate everybody showcasing their products. And again, Tom, drop your contact information into the chat so everybody knows who to reach out to in order to get in touch with BuildSync. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.